In this episode of Explore Omaha, I had the pleasure of speaking with Steve Schmidt. He's an attorney with Carlson and Blakeman, 30 plus years of experience in estate planning and elder care law. We sat down and talked about powers of attorney. I hope you enjoy. Hey Steve, I was hoping to learn more about powers of attorney. What can you tell me about those, what they are, how you get them, why they're useful, maybe some upsides or downsides?
Sure. Yeah. Well, powers of attorney are really basic documents that everybody, once they become an adult, either 18 or 19, should have a power of attorney. And there's two different kinds of power of attorney typically. There's financial power of attorney, and then there's healthcare power of attorney. So both documents are really important. Healthcare power of attorney is important so that you make sure the right people are making the decision for you. If you can't make a healthcare decision, somebody else needs to step in and do that for you. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's one of your kids, maybe it's just a good friend or another family member. But you want to make sure the right person is making decisions. And the other thing with the healthcare power of attorney is there's HIPAA regulations, which means that even if you've been married for a long time or have close family members, the doctor and the nurses are really not supposed to talk to anybody about your health without HIPAA authorization. So a healthcare power of attorney has the HIPAA authorization in it also.
That's really important to have an advocate on your side, especially in those healthcare situations. How does one get a power of attorney? Can they just write it up themselves and everybody sign it, or do they have to come and see you?
There are different forms out there, and sometimes that makes the most sense, particularly if you got a young person, doesn't have a lot of money and doesn't want to go into any more detail. But most of the time they're done in conjunction with a full estate plan. So usually everybody needs a little bit more than just a power of attorney. They also need like a basic will, basic trust. So again, that maybe isn't important for somebody who's only 18 or 19 or 20, but as soon as you get married or have kids, you really need to get more than just a power of attorney.
It's interesting you say somebody 18 or 19 should have a power of attorney. Do you mean someone should have a power of attorney over them, or they should have one for their parents?
So, I mean, they should have one for themselves. So if I'm 19 years old, really, I'm used to probably my mom and dad making decisions for me. But, you know, when I'm an adult, they can't do that legally. And so sometimes it happens anyway, but legally there should be a document in place saying, hey, I trust my mom, I trust my dad, or who do I trust to make those medical decisions?
Otherwise, based on HIPAA, parents can't really talk to the doctors about you if you're over 18, correct?
That's right. That's right. So, and the age is different in every state. So, but the other thing is financial power of attorney, and that's almost just as important as the healthcare power of attorney. So, for financial power of attorney, usually these documents are completely separate, and a lot of times the person we want to take care of our finances is different than the person we want to take care of our healthcare decisions. So, the financial one is different. A financial one can be effective immediately. What that means is, you know, if I trust somebody, I can say, yes, this document's effective immediately. That way, even if I'm fully able to make decisions, somebody else can still do those for me. And that can be very useful if I'm out of town. Let's say I go on a trip or something, or I'm out of the country and I want somebody to make this, you know, be able to do things for me. A financial power of attorney, they can do that even though I'm still competent.
Now, I run into that situation from time to time when I'm selling houses. So would that type of power of attorney be what one would need if their parent was incapacitated or passed away? Well, I guess it wouldn't be useful if someone had passed away. But if the parent needed someone to make some decisions on selling the house, that's the financial power of attorney is what they need.
And that can be a good tool in that area. And you're right, if somebody passes away, that power of attorney ceases to work. So some people don't realize that a power of attorney ceases when somebody passes away. But yeah, usually there's a better way than a power of attorney, like a trust or something like that. But a power of attorney can work even if with selling a house. That's correct.
Does the power of attorney doesn't eliminate the need for probate, right? That's where the trust comes in.
That's right. Yeah, we're in the court system if we don't have like a trust or some other way to avoid probate. So a power of attorney and a will does nothing to avoid the court system if I become incapacitated or pass away.
Okay. Let's assume someone, well, does the person that you have the power of attorney for have to authorize it?
So if you're asking, does the person have to know that they're named as the power of attorney, and they don't. So it's pretty common for me to actually do an estate plan for somebody that's younger, somebody that's in their 40s and 50s, and they will name somebody as their power of attorney, and that person doesn't even know it, and that's okay.
Well, actually, what I meant was like, let's assume the parent gets in a car accident and they need a power of attorney. Now it's too late, right? Because the parent that's in a coma can't give authorization to the daughter or son or friend to be their power of attorney. So they should really get this done well before that.
That's right. Yeah. A lot of times people are a little reluctant to do anything because they say, hey, I don't really need this now. But yeah, the time to do it is when you don't need it, well before you do need it. And I always tell my clients, once you get this done, you live longer because a lot of times once you get this done, you feel relieved, like, hey, this is important, I got this done. And so that actually is good for my clients mentally and maybe physically.
Does the power of attorney expire? I mean, once they do it, do they have to re-up it every 5 years or anything like that?
It doesn't expire. It can last for a long, long time, as long as you're alive. There are some financial institutions that want something more current. And so if it's more than maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years old, maybe your bank or some institution will say, hey, that's too old. But legally, it should be able to still work. So we still like to update those from time to time because things change. And so it's a good idea to every 5 years or maybe less than 5 years to actually look at those documents and make sure they still are what you want them to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any downsides to a power of attorney?
Well, maybe the biggest downside is if you put somebody in there that's not trustworthy, they can start doing things. So you just have to be careful to make sure you name the right person to do that. There's always recourse if somebody does that. But yeah, that's one of the biggest downsides is make sure you trust somebody. One way that people try and avoid that is they say, hey, my power of attorney is not going to work unless I'm incapacitated. But then sometimes you run into the issue of having to prove somebody's incapacitated. So the most important thing is make sure you pick somebody that you trust and somebody that's trustworthy.
That's an interesting question. And what happens if you pick that person and 5 years later you find out, they're not trustworthy, I'd like to change to someone else? Can that be done at that time?
It's easy to change, and you could have more than one power of attorney. So if you're changing it and want to take somebody out, it's important to revoke the old one. And so there are times when we're doing a new power of attorney that we explicitly say we're revoking an old power of attorney because we want to make sure that they no longer have any authority.
Okay. Does that person that you're revoking it from, they don't have to know, right? You might tell them, but just having that revocation document is sufficient?
It's sufficient, but you want to make sure that they're not trying to use an old document because that can happen too. They can still have an old document and try and do things. So when you revoke it, you want to make sure there's certain steps. Maybe tell your bank and tell whoever's involved with your finances that you revoke the old one.
I see. Anything else that one should know out there that probably we all need to get one of these in place for ourselves and our loved ones? Is there anything else that somebody might need to know?
Well, power of attorneys are just a really good tool, and it's also maybe one of the more basic tools. And so, if you're talking to somebody that you're working with, a client, a customer, or somebody that you care about, and you ask them about their power of attorney, and they aren't quite sure how to answer the question because they're not sure if they trust the person or not sure if they even have a power of attorney, that's usually a really good indication they need to get some planning in place.
Okay, so if just me as a layman, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I have a power of attorney for my dad and I need to sell their house, how do I know that that document is the appropriate one? Is there any way for me to be able to spot something or understand it, or should I just call you?
Yeah, it's a good idea to get more than just one person's insight on that. So maybe you say, hey, can I talk to your parents about that, or do you have other siblings? And that's a lot of times if there's a couple of siblings, we can get a pretty good indication fairly quickly of if all the siblings are trying to take care of mom and dad, or maybe you have one sibling that's trying to kind of go rogue a little bit. So yeah, it's a good idea to do some double checking if there's any question on that.
Awesome. Do you have anything in closing?
That's it. Good to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very good, very insightful. Appreciate your time.